Welcome back. What would the world be like if Islam had not existed? Would there be conflict in the Middle East? Would Al-Qaeda still pose a threat to the West? Yes, says Graham Fuller, author of A World Without Islam. Fuller claims that the problems between the West and the Middle East have very little to do with Islam. Here to help me examine his claims is Dr. Shabir Ali, president of the Islamic Information Center. Dr. Shabir Ali, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
Now, when I saw the title, A World Without Islam, I thought, here's another book about a negative portrayal about Islam. But it didn't turn out to be that way. You have the book with you. Maybe you can show us and discuss
the title of the book might suggest that we wish that Islam did not exist,
yes.
A world without Islam. But what he's actually saying by that title is that even if Islam did not exist, the world would still be steeped in many of the conflicts that we notice today. In particular, he replies to Samuel Huntington, who in his book, A Clash of Civilizations, has suggested that there is an inevitable clash between East and West, between Islam and the Western world. And in his reply, Graham Fuller is saying, no, it is not so at all. In fact, many of the conflicts that we notice now, and especially what is referred to as the clash between the Islamic world and the Western world, are deep-seated geopolitical conflicts that would have existed anyhow, even if Islam never existed. So if you imagine a world without Islam, don't think that it'll be a world that is free of these conflicts.
So he's saying that there's this disparity between the East and the West, or a division between the East and the West that existed long ago. How long ago is he talking about?
Well, he's saying that this predates Islam. If you think, for example, about the Christian church that existed before Islam, there was already a schism in the Christian church. Of course, that schism reached its apogee in the year 1054, when East and West definitely split, but there were tensions long before that. Ecumenical councils were being held, like, for example, the council at Nicaea, but not everyone was in full agreement with what was decided, and council after council had to settle theological disputes, which remained among many Christian groups.
And he's saying that it wasn't just, even then it wasn't a religious conflict, it was more political and regional, a power struggle, to say.
Yes. Do you put your power in Rome or in Constantinople?
Yeah.
This is East and West right here, or at least as it was conceived at the time. And in the year 717, there was the great iconoclast controversy. Again, this is between East and West in Christendom. Aside from this, the general trend of separating East and West and the conflicts that remain between them came to survive into our present day as a tension between the United States and Russia, for example. Here you have East and West. And it is interesting, as he pointed out, that Islam gets dragged into the picture.
How does it get dragged into the picture?
Well, one example of this is the fact that the United States had supported the Taliban to battle Russia. So here it's a conflict basically between East and West, but it's not a conflict directly involving Islam, but Islam gets dragged into this conflict by the support of the United States for the Taliban at that time.
But how did Islam originally get drawn into the East versus West dichotomy?
Well, as Graham Fuller points out, there has been a long history of interventions from the West into the politics of the Middle East. And some of his facts are so startling that I found myself going to other sources to check these out, because they seem unbelievable at first, especially for things that happened before we were born. For example, he spoke about a 1953 coup in Iran to overthrow a democratically elected president, Mohammad Mossadegh, at the time. So that coup was successful, and as he pointed out, both the United States, the CIA, and the MI6 in Britain, their secret service, had a hand in this coup to overthrow Mohammad Mossadegh. I searched out an article from the Guardian newspaper which actually verified that last year some secret documents in the United States had become declassified, and those documents show the involvement of the CIA and MI6. So this was published last August in The Guardian. Now, he tries to get to the bottom of this, why this kind of involvement, as he points out, and The Guardian also acquiesces in. The main problem for the West was that Mohammad Mossadegh wanted to nationalize the oil industry, and that would be good for the Iranian people, but not so good for the West. And the West wanted to guarantee for themselves a steady supply of oil at good prices. And for them, having this man as president of Iran, though he was democratically elected, was not a good thing. And this explains the hand of the CIA and MI6 in this coup in 1953. As I said, this happened before I was even born, and the information is so startling that I had to go search it out in other sources to see if this man really has it all together.
It's interesting, Brother Shabir, we haven't talked about who Graham Fuller is. He actually was part of the CIA, so maybe you can discuss that a little bit.
Yes. On the back of the book, his photograph and some details about his bio are given. He is a former vice chairman of the National Intelligence Council at the CIA and a former senior political scientist at RAND. And it says here that at the time of the writing of this book, obviously, that he is a current adjunct professor of history at Simon Fraser University. He's the author of numerous books about the Middle East, including The Future of Political Islam.
Which makes it all the more fascinating that he's discussing this subject. Now, he also talks about what he calls the Alice in Wonderland delusion, which is that we often ask what's wrong with Islam, what's wrong with the Middle East, what's wrong with all these Islamic countries, but we don't ask about the U.S.'s role in these events, which you kind of hinted at earlier. The U.S. is a superpower, so of course it has an impact on the rest of the world. On the one hand, we're saying the U.S. has all this strength, but on the other hand, we're not recognizing that it has an impact on the rest of the world. So maybe you can discuss that a little bit.
Yes, and he's calling on the United States and Western powers more generally to look at their own policies. It's not enough, he says, to ask, why do they hate us? And to be fair, he's not looking at the ills of the Islamic world. And to him, that has already been discussed in numerous books, but he thinks that what is lacking is what you described by this term, the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, where the information flowing to the general American public seems to be one-sided in that it's always seen from the point of view that they're bad, we're good, why do they hate us? But he wants these powers to look at their policies. For example, he recommends towards the end of his book that the U.S. should stop intervening and interfering in the politics of the Middle East, that they should withdraw their troops from the Middle Eastern soil, and they should look into the Palestinian problem and forge a solution, because these are some of the issues that continue to cause discontent in the Middle East and elsewhere. And this kind of discontent eventually surfaces in the violent acts that we're noticing. These acts are unjustifiable, to be sure, and yet we can help to stymie or avoid these instances of violence by correcting some of our own policies and practices.
And he also says that religion is sometimes used as a banner, as an umbrella to rally people together for a cause. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Yes, and this has been shown again and again. When the then President of the United States, George W. Bush, spoke about his strategy of shock and awe, he referred to it as a crusade. Of course, he changed his tune in the light of current criticism, but the fact that he would put the matter in that term, which is a religious term, or a term that has connections with religious history, for better or for worse, shows that there is a tendency among people to justify their acts of violence by giving it a kind of religious veneer. and this is being done at many different levels.
So when we're trying to analyze these events, is it necessary then for us to just strip away the religious veneer, or is it relevant in understanding certain
It
life
is.
events,
It
world
is
events?
relevant, and its relevance needs to be acknowledged and explored, but also not to be exaggerated.
Okay.
One has to see past the surface into the core of the issues, and he's saying that, for example, when the West supports dictators who rule over people and they violate human rights in their countries, but they are kept in power by the support of the West, because having them there and having them suppress their people in fact serves the interests of other countries, then people naturally will rise against this. And we shouldn't suppose, oh, because they are Muslims, we have a problem with them, or they have a problem with us. What do you imagine? If they were not Muslims, they would have accepted all of this as they are? So he's saying you have to see past this religious coating and see the core of the issue. If there's an injustice being done, then you can be sure that eventually that will come back to haunt you. So deal with it in your foreign policy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shabir Ali.
You're welcome.
That was Graham Fuller, A World Without Islam. We'll take a break. When we return, we will answer questions we've received from you, our viewers.